So today we're going to be talking about making a tool for knife making rather than making a knife itself. We are making a knife maker's brooch. So this is a really useful little tool for cleaning out the inside of handles, for hidden tang knives, for tang knives that you want to put the tang into the handle rather than have it showing on the outside. So I used 1080 steel and cut a small rectangle out, and then used an angle grinder just to be able to create some notches to retain the handle. And then I got a bigger grinding disc just to be able to take this section out of the middle. That's a wonderful little vise, but yeah, it's only got relatively small jaws, so if you have stuff hanging off the end, it doesn't hold on to it too well. So having got the basic shape done, took it inside and cleaned up that middle section. Just made sure it was nice and flat using a hand file. And then got on with creating the teeth on the actual brooch itself. So I've seen a number of slightly different designs on this. I've seen sort of cross-cut teeth and various things, but I just wanted something that was nice and simple. I also wanted to make sure I put one tooth right in at the very end, just to make sure that I could get right to the very end of it, because a lot of the ones that I've seen, essentially you just miss on that very last couple of millimeters of depth. So I used a triangular file just to mark up exactly where I was going to be cutting, and then started to create a little bit of depth. You can see that tiny little tooth. It is only a tiny little tooth at the very end. And then proceeded with that triangular file, so keeping a very flat edge at the tip and then sloping down towards the handle. Essentially just creating saw teeth. So I decided to use a 3.6mm piece of steel because, generally speaking, most of the steel that I use, that's kind of the minimum width. So I know that if I'm using that size of steel, I don't actually need to go any wider than that. It should fit in my slot. So if that fits in the slot in the wood really nicely, then actually the tang will fit in really nicely as well. Just tidying up those teeth, making sure the edges are nice and sharp, and just getting that sorted out. Quick tidy up, and then on to the next step. So for the handle, I chose some burr oak, and because I knew it was 3.6mm steel, I got a 4mm drill bit, drilled 3 holes in it, and then actually used it a little bit like a milling machine just to sort of clear out some of that depth, and then used the unfinished knife maker's brooch just to actually clean out the slot. And there it is as the initial rough fit up. Then use that drum sander just to be able to clean up the edges, clean up the sides, make sure that it was comfortable and that it wasn't going to cause any damage where I didn't want it to cause damage. And then started to work on the handle. And yeah, this was not super successful. I decided to cut all the corners off, so eventually I wanted a really nice circular, sort of just little knob handle for this brooch, but this is not the easiest way to be able to create straight cuts, so it was a little bit rough. So I had to use quite a lot of sanding and rasping to be able to make this round. So we then just started with 60 grit sandpaper and started shaping up the handle to create a round handle. I also decided that I wanted to put a couple of teeth actually onto the side of the rasp. This isn't something I've seen done before, and I'm not sure how effectively I did it, because obviously I didn't want to go so deep that it would start bringing into any doubt the strength of the brooch, but I just wanted to make sure that it would actually help clean the sides as well. So I put in just a couple of little notches. That means it's got a little bit of bite on the side, nothing like as much as it has on the main end, but it just, yeah, hopefully it'll just give a little bit of extra bite where it needs it. So handle is starting to look reasonably round. I think actually I ended up going back and doing a little bit more work to this later, but yeah, the handle is looking roughly as I wanted it to. So it's getting close to time for heat treat. Just making sure that all the surfaces were nice and clean before I heat treated it. Make sure that I didn't have any work to do afterwards. Because this is a purely functional tool, I actually didn't do any sanding at all after the heat treat. I'm quite happy with that slightly scale finish. So heat treating, this was my first test run on this coffee can forge and filling up my quench tank just there. The forge looks a bit different than it does now, because actually I tidied everything up and sorted it out with some refractory cement, because that basic plaster of Paris mix, it just didn't work. So I have mentioned all of that in my video. If you're interested, go and have a little look at my coffee can forge video. So warming up the oil to 60 degrees centigrade, so it's got slightly less viscosity, so it will actually help cool down quicker. You can also see a little bit of steam coming out from the side of the forge there where the blowtorch goes in, and that was simply because actually the plaster of Paris hadn't completely set yet and dried out, so there was still quite a lot of moisture just to be able to come away. So ready for my quench. I said this in the other video, I left this out of the forge for way too long before it went into the quench, but it actually did really well and got a nice hardening, and yeah, sliding off like glass. You can hear the noise. That was nicely hardened. And ready for glue up. So I used a Gorilla Glue, not sponsored, 5-minute epoxy, put loads into that little tang slot, and then yeah, put it in, clamped it up, made sure it was well pushed into place. And then I'm not quite sure why, but I decided not to actually leave it in the vise overnight. I took it out and then just left it to cure as it was, but it wasn't going anywhere. Everything was absolutely fine. And there we go, fitted up. So back to more sanding on that handle. That burr oak is just beautiful. I would be really interested to know if actually any of you have any suggestions on how to fill those little voids. For a tool like this, it's absolutely fine, but if I was going to do a knife handle in it, I feel like I maybe want to fill in any of those voids. So if you do have any suggestions, please let me know down below. Just tidying up that top fitting edge. You can see that nice black quenched finish on the file, on the brooch. That's how I decided to leave it. You can see as I approach 600 grit, that finish on that burr oak is just lovely. And a little bit of white spirit just to bring out the grain, and then some tung oil to seal the wood, and did 3 coats of tung oil over the next couple of days just to make sure that's completely sealed. And there we go, it works. So testing it on the first knife I used it for, this was a garden knife. Again, there is a video on my channel of me making this. And yeah, it works, it cuts. It made it really nice and straightforward to be able to get that tang in and fit it up well. And that's it all finished. So thank you very much for watching. Let me know if you've got any suggestions on how I could improve this. I understand aesthetically it's not the most beautiful thing in the world, but functionally it works well. So but I'd be really keen to hear if you had any suggestions on improving the functionality of it. You can see those little teeth in the side. Thank you very much for watching. Please subscribe if you'd like to see more knife making videos or any other videos. I've got a lot of various content on my channel. Like the video if you liked it, and thank you very much. Bye bye.